Hi there YouTube. Today I'd like to talk about what's wrong with living in somebody's basement, or aka cheap living. Now, there is a perception in modern society that at certain points of your life you will live in a certain way. When you are a child, you are expected to live with your parents. When you are an adolescent or going to college or university, you will either still live at home or you'll live in really cheap digs or a cheap apartment or a flat share or some way. Students do tend to live a little bit on the edge. And then once you've left college or left school, or by whatever means, you will settle down. You will have a job, basically. Now, once you are in a job, you are expected to live in a certain way. And by a certain way, I would say the general societal norm is that you will live in for example, a house, probably a detached or semi-detached house. You'll probably have 2 or 3 bedrooms. You'll probably have a couple of dogs, maybe a couple of cats as well. You'll have a wife or a husband or a significant partner, whatever. Probably a couple of cars. You will go on holidays using planes to go elsewhere. You'll live a particular type of life. Now, why? Just why? Why do people think that? Because that's how society has been. And there is a stigma if you are an adult, and by adult, let's say over 25. There is a stigma for people being adult and in work and not living in that life. I love going back to the controversy of Ghostbusters. There was a big thing of saying, why... I think Melissa McCarthy went, she made a joke on a TV show that said, the next thing that somebody says after they've been all misogynistic about the film is, now get out. The mother is going to be saying, now get upstairs and take out the trash. The clear concept being that basically you will be living with your parents or whatever, and that's a bad thing. Now, I, possibly slightly older than a lot of my listeners, but I'm not afraid to tell people this, I'm 42. I live in an apartment. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I lived with my parents until I left school. Then I rented an apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, and eventually I bought my 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm now 42, so theoretically I'm absolutely somebody who should have a wife, 2 kids, a car, semi-detached house, the full bit. But I haven't. I live in an apartment. I live alone in an apartment. And I'm completely cool with this. Now, and I did feel for a while, there was a real societal pressure for me. And at some points, I used to get a little bit depressed. On occasion, I remember when I turned 40, I looked around myself in my flat, and I love my flat. I want to point this out. My flat is decorated exactly how I want. It's got DVDs in it. It's decorated how I want. It's got it's not a man cave. I don't like the word man cave. But it's definitely a bachelor pad. And I actually, when I hit 40, I sort of stood there and I thought, well, is this what my life's become? Shouldn't I be living the traditional, house as I've discussed? And then I turned around to myself and I looked at myself in the mirror, so to speak, and I went, actually, no. I'm actually completely happy with how I am. I don't particularly enjoy gardening. So why would I want a house that's got a garden? That's why I've got an apartment. What is an apartment except a house without a garden, in my humble view? It's got 2 bedrooms, which means I've got a bedroom and I've got a second bedroom that can either be used for guests if anyone comes, but most of the time it's set up as an office. The rest of the house is set up, for me. I've got my TV and I've got my DVDs and I've got a coffee table and a lounge, all the things you'd have in a house. I'm not particularly, an animal person, so I don't have pets. My job involves working for a transportation company, so I get free transportation. So why would I need a car? And I've never really found anyone to share my life with. So we've just ticked everything off. So I, wouldn't need vehicles, don't need the car. Don't like gardening, wouldn't need the garden. don't do animals, and I tend to be out a lot, so it wouldn't be fair to have pets, so don't do the animals thing. And you just keep ticking things off until you realise, well, actually I'm living in my apartment, I'm living in what it amounts to a house, but without all the housey things. If I want to go out, I can. If I want to go to the cinema, I can. If I want to go on holiday, I can. There should be no stigma to being a 42-year-old man living in an apartment. What's the problem with that? The beauty, of course, of that is it's ridiculously cheap. Well, I say ridiculously cheap, that's a lie. It's a lot cheaper living in an apartment than a house, because I don't have all those additional expenses. I don't have additional mouths to feed. I've never really felt very paternal, so I've never had kids. Don't have additional mouths to feed. I don't have pets to feed. I don't have a car to pay for the expenses of. I don't have to pay or spend money on gardening. So, what is the problem? And the answer is there is no problem. But society doesn't seem to see this. Society does stigmatise people, as seen in the Melissa McCarthy look on Ghostbusters about taking out the trash, living in somebody's basement. It costs me a fraction of what it costs. For example, I have my boss. He has either 2 or 3 kids, I think, a wife, several cars. He's got the full thing. He's living that particular middle class dream. And he must be on 20, maybe even £30,000 more than me. And I don't begrudge him. He's extremely knowledgeable what he does. Fair enough to the guy. But if you think about it, just think of all the additional expenses that guy's got to do. So, yes, obviously he's going to have more disposable income than me, but his outgoings are going to be horrendously different to mine. My outgoings, they're not low. I'm not like a prepper who's living on £3.20 a week. But my outgoings are minimal, really. I haven't really got very much. My requirements are not great. I have an internet connection. I have a television. Obviously I've got gas lighting, and not gas lighting. I've got gas lighting, heating, etc. Everything's fine, and my expenses are much lower than somebody with a house of my age that you would expect. But what's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that. Nobody should ever listen to somebody who tries to stigmatise how they live. We all have the way we wish to live, and why shouldn't we be allowed to live the way? Some people want to live in an extravagant way. Some people want to live in a cheap way. I like living in a cheap way, and I think everyone should live how they want without any consideration for what other people think of them.